Welcome back to Foreign Correspondents. I'm Seoul with our panel of foreign journalists. Welcome to the program. Now, two of the world's famous, the most high-profile leaders in the world today are probably US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Now, if all goes to plan, the two will be sitting down for a talk in May. What do you think the meeting will look like?
It's difficult to predict anything. I think really we are entering a new cycle where everybody who predicts something turns out to be wrong, so we have to be very careful, but that would be really interesting, and I think it's a very positive development. Obviously, Donald Trump has power. Kim Jong-un is the one with the power in North Korea, so the best way to find a solution is to have these two people talk, and then anything can happen, but at least it's a first step.
Elise?
There's a lot of skepticism about this, both here in South Korea and in the United States, but the one positive spin on it is that because of the nature of the North Korean regime, which is that it's a totalitarian, authoritarian regime, that really the man who can make decisions is Kim Jong-un. So if you're going to do a deal, you should go straight to the top. And so in that respect, Donald Trump has it right by agreeing to meet with Kim Jong-un.
Frank, different ideas?
Well, I think that, we need to get to the issues that they're going to be talking about, or maybe setting up for, future negotiators to discuss, and that's the denuclearization of North Korea and a security guarantee for the North Korean government. And when you talk about those issues, you can run into some trouble because both countries have really drawn red lines that they have said previously that they wouldn't negotiate on. So there has to be some type of compromise take place. Still, the meeting of the two leaders is definitely a positive development, and through that we could see more sort of hope that negotiators might find some way to bring a more stable peace to the Korean Peninsula.
All right. So as was mentioned, planned for this coming May is a meeting between two eccentric world leaders, but a historic meeting nonetheless. So this week on Foreign Correspondents, the topic is Washington-Pyongyang Summit. On March 8th, US President Donald Trump agreed to hold a historic summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
President Trump appreciated the briefing and said he would meet Kim Jong-un by May.
The decision over the proposed meetup, which could decide the fate of the Korean Peninsula, took only 45 minutes.
We've accepted the invitation to talk. Let's not forget that the North Koreans did promise something. They've promised to denuclearize. They've promised to stop nuclear and missile testing. Let's be very clear, the United States has made zero concessions.
Neighbors Japan and China welcomed the news, but were bewildered at the same time. With groundbreaking changes to the geopolitical situation in Northeast Asia possibly in store, the two countries may be worried about being excluded from the process. Aware of their concerns, on March 12th, the Moon administration sent National Security Advisor Chung Eui-yong to China and Russia, and National Intelligence Service Director Seoul to Japan. National Security Advisor Chung Eui-yong met with Chinese President Xi Jinping upon arrival, praising China for its key role in helping to realize both the Inter-Korean Summit as well as the Trump-Kim meeting. Meanwhile, National Intelligence Service Director Seoul received a warm welcome by Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, with the Japanese leader saying he was eager to fully cooperate with South Korea.
詳細な説明に感謝申し上げるとともに、ここに至るソフン委員長をはじめとする韓国政府の努力に敬意を表する旨申し上げました。
Ahead of the first ever summit meeting between President Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, anticipation is building on the possible discussion that could take place between the two and its outcome. So what was your initial reaction when you first heard the news that Trump had accepted Kim Jong-un's invitation?
I was kind of shocked with the whole development. I mean, I was surprised that the South Korean delegation that visited North Korea got to meet with Kim Jong-un. I was surprised that they secured a summit between Kim and Moon. At that time, I was, and then shocked when actually they announced that there was going to be a Kim-Trump summit.
Right. Were you surprised at the way they announced it? Because
yeah, definitely.
It was a foreign official in front of the White House announcing, a decision from the U.S. president as opposed to any White House official.
Definitely. I was surprised how they did it. They kind of came out this back door, and it showed them come out kind of a back door of the White House and in an odd sort of setting. And then to have the South Koreans announce a summit between the leaders of two other countries, I thought was quite strange. And I would, guess or hope that there was confirmation between the White House and some North Korean officials before that took place. But still, more than a week later, we're not sure, and we haven't heard from North Korean media confirming that the North Koreans have accepted Trump's acceptance of that initial invitation.
Elise?
So the backstory here, the behind the scenes on it, was that for us, as this story broke, it was the morning and it was the evening in U.S. time. And what Trump had done is something he has never done before, which is he actually popped his head into the White House briefing room.
That's right.
While reporters were still there working this was around dinner time, Thursday night U.S. time, and he popped his head in and said, there's going to be a major announcement. So he, in his reality show host kind of way, was teasing something that was going to come. So by the time Chung actually stood in front of cameras at the stakeout location outside the White House, there was already an understanding of what was likely to happen, which was that Kim Jong-un had invited Trump. But still, it didn't make the fact that he decided so quickly any less stunning, because it breaks with all precedent. Typically, the United States wouldn't reward or would see a meeting with its head of state as a reward, especially because these are such out of balance powers.
What about you, Fran?
Oh, same as my colleagues. I was totally shocked and surprised. My first initiation, wow, this is happening. And then as Elise explained how it happened, it's so weird in a way. Like the South Korean emissaries were not even supposed to meet Trump that day. They were supposed to meet him the day after. And the fact that he, on the spot, accepted so fast, and then he sent, as Frank said, he sent the South Korean to announce it. That was really stunning.
Right, I agree that they're probably seeing it as a reward because, they're being acknowledged as an equal counterpart on the international stage. Now, I'm sure that you'll all be covering the news very thoroughly if and when the meeting does take place. But is there one particular area that you'll be focusing on?
Ego. I think we'll be focusing on ego. Right now, we're thinking, can this actually happen? Will this actually happen? And I really think it's irresistible for both leaders. They both like to sort of, I think, manipulate the international media. And this is an opportunity that will come along once in a lifetime, even once, I don't know, in a century for the leaders of these two countries. As a, sort of media analyst as well, I can tell you, the attention and the interest in this is kind of unprecedented. We just had the Olympics here in South Korea. This is the international political Olympics.
Right. And Elise, any different points of focus?
I think it needs to be clear, the United States needs to make clear what exactly it's going to ask for beyond complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization, which is the line that we hear again and again. But before you get to sort of the end point, what are the points leading up to that? And right now, everything, I guess the organization, the arm of the U.S. government that's supposed to help pave the road for this summit is not only hollowed out from the past year, but also having to deal with a huge disruption.
Right. So what will you be focusing on?
I'm working on trying to understand what kind of agreement can be found. I don't think North Korea will completely give up its nuclear program, so there must be some kind of intermediary steps. So I'm trying to ask expert opinion about maybe a freeze or maybe a partial dismantlement. I mean, what kind of type of agreement could be possible? So that's my focus.
I think the key thing, though, in terms of the summit, is that the two leaders don't try to solve all of those issues really at all, and just make it kind of a positive meeting of the leaders, and then, get toward other negotiations later on that are going to iron out those details.
So just step by step.
Just step by step, and make this one a kind of a baby step.
Now, as you mentioned before, this would mark the first time that a North Korean leader is sitting down with an incumbent US president. What do you think is the main hindrance, the main obstacle that prevented such a meeting from taking place so far?
Well, the animosity between the two countries that has really festered since the Korean War is certainly one of them. And the development of North Korea's nuclear and missile programs would be another one. The type of government that exists in North Korea would be another one. And the governments that have been sort of dominant here in South Korea, the conservative governments that have been dominant here in South Korea would be another one. So there are a lot of issues that have kept the two sides really apart.
Right. Do you think these latest developments have softened the media's portrayal of Kim Jong-un?
Not really. I mean, of course, we talk less about human rights because there is more other things to talk about, but it's not like suddenly Kim Jong-un became a different person. Maybe a little bit in South Korea. His sister, Kim Yo-jong, was somehow covered, was sometimes a bit too much. She was almost like a people. They treat her as if she was a
celebrity.
Yeah, a celebrity, yeah. Exactly.
I heard a recent report of how Donald Trump was giving a speech, and when he mentioned Kim Jong-un, everybody kind of booed, and he kind of hushed their booing of Kim Jong-un because he had agreed to meet with him. Mm-hmm. And I actually think that's a positive way to look at that. If the U.S. continues to demonize North Korea to the degree that Vice President Mike Pence did prior to the Olympic Games, we might see this summit again not happen.
I just want to emphasize that I still don't see any evidence that this is going to be pulled off by May. Mm-hmm. Namely, we have no idea how a meeting is going to happen when we don't know whether North Korea has even agreed that it wants to do this by May, and B, what the U.S. even wants. Like, the U.S. policy positions have been all over the place because who speaks for the U.S.? Only Donald Trump or his State Department? There's so much disruption and dysfunction right now in Washington that to say that this can be pulled off within 90 days is a real long shot, which means I think that we should really be paying attention to the Moon Kim summit, which has a far higher likelihood of actually happening, and that is scheduled for April.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good point. And then at the Moon Kim summit, you can have sort of a development of that definition of those terms, denuclearization and security guarantees, kind of, become more understood. And that might pave the way for a smoother, I think, Kim-Trump summit later on.
All right, so whether it happens or not, despite being planned for May, the relationship between the two leaders, Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump, have not always been so civil, as I'm sure we are all too well aware. So in our next video, we'll take a look at the relationship between the two so far. US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will finally sit down for a direct face-to-face talk sometime in May. While the two leaders have completely different backgrounds, they do share one thing in common. That is their habit of engaging in harsh rhetoric to condemn one another. The bitter exchange first got underway in April 2017, at a time when North Korea was engaging in repeated ballistic missile provocations. In response, US President Donald Trump labeled North Korean leader Kim Jong-un as a madman. Later in September, after North Korea's 6th nuclear test, President Trump coined the nickname Rocket Man for Kim Jong-un during his speech at the UN General Assembly, sending a powerful warning message to the regime.
The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime. The United States is ready, willing, and able, but hopefully this will not be necessary.
In a rare move, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un personally stepped forward to release a statement criticizing Trump.
트럼프가 그 무엇을 생각했든 간에 그 이상의 결과를 보게 될 것이다. 미국의 늑다리 미치광이를 반드시 불로 다스릴 것이다.
The heated exchange continued into the new year, with Kim Jong-un boasting that he had a nuclear button during his New Year's address.
미국 번터 전역이 우리의 핵 타격 사정권 안에 있으며 핵 단추가 내 사무실 책상 위에 항상 놓여 있다는 것, 이는 결코 위협이 아닌 현실임을 똑바로 알아야 합니다.
The very next day, President Trump went on Twitter and countered that he also had a nuclear button, except that his was bigger and more powerful. Some onlookers have expressed concerns over the two leaders' agreement to sit down face-to-face, given their past history of exchanging harsh personal insults. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said she's worried over the lack of experienced diplomats under the Trump administration. Then CIA Director Mike Pompeo, on the other hand, says the Trump administration is well aware of North Korea's past history of breaking promises and is therefore keeping up an appropriate guard. All eyes across the globe are narrowing on the potential outcome of the summit between the two leaders, who have set aside their animosity to settle differences through dialogue. So Fred, why has Trump suddenly changed his hardline stance on North Korea, do you think?
He said in the past that he wanted to meet Kim Jong-un, so in that sense it's not that different. Even during the campaign he said we'll have a burger with him. I think he's extremely confident in his ability to make a deal. The best way to find a solution is to talk directly to Kim Jong-un, and I think he understands that. And he doesn't care so much about the concern we hear about, oh, that would give more legitimacy to the Kim family. I mean, the Kim family doesn't need more legitimacy. He's already in power for 70 years. I think he's very pragmatic.
And what about Kim Jong-un? Why do you think he's warming up?
Well, it seems as though Kim Jong-un has been very clear about his intentions in his New Year's addresses. Last year, at the beginning of 2017, said, I'm going to try to complete my state nuclear force and, you know, dedicate myself to that. And then it did, with the Hwasong 14 and the Hwasong 15 tests. And then by this year, he did the pivot. He very clearly signaled his pivot on January 1st of 2018, saying, you know, making overtures to South Korea. And so Kim Jong-un has been actually very easy to read. I mean, he telegraphs what he says he's going to do, and then he does it. So it seems that this year, you know, he's really focused on his policy, his Byungjin policy, right, of economic advancement at the same time as building up the military. And so now that he said he's secure, he feels secure in having a nuclear deterrent, and they are a nuclear country, capable country now, that he can turn to other priorities. And this is, I just take him at his word. I mean, it seems like he's just doing what he says said he was going to do.
And a little bit in defense of Trump, I don't think he really gave up that hard line. They have said that they're going to continue the maximum pressure campaign against North Korea, and North Korea has given up something. They've agreed to a freeze. They've agreed to discuss denuclearization. They've agreed to accept the South Korea-U.S. military drills that are going to take place prior to that summit. So there has been some movement from North Korea, as Elise mentioned, telegraphed by Kim Jong-un's New Year's address.
Right. Now, of course it was a concerted effort, but if you think there's one party that deserves the most credit, who do you think it is?
Moon Jae-in, that's an easy answer for me. I mean, even prior to his election, when he said he was going to engage North Korea, when he invited North Korea to the Olympics, like even early on in his administration, securing North Korea's participation in the Olympic Games, I really think that paved the way for all of this to take place. And, you know, at the same time, motivated maybe Kim Jong-un to pivot around, and you wouldn't have seen that if you had alignment of a conservative administration here in South Korea. None of those things probably would have happened here.
Is that a unanimous?
Yeah, I'm very impressed by his negotiating skills. Really, he's a negotiator, and as you said, he wanted that. He said he wanted to do that long time ago. He pulled it off. Nobody would have expected 2 summits even 3 months ago, and what he made is really, really impressive. Yes.
And what do you think regional powers such as Japan, China, Russia have played in facilitating this summit?
Well, Japan was blindsided by it. Abe has been very diplomatic, saying that, you know, South Korea, U.S., and Japan are together on this. But the word out of the first, 24 hours was that Japan was scrambling. They were back on their heels. Abe was trying to go to Washington very quickly for an emergency summit, because Abe knows as well as the rest of us that Trump listens to the last person he spoke to. And so, Abe wanted to get in there. But now it seems like South Korea has been doing the diplomacy along with other parties as well, with China and with Russia, to try and make sure everybody's aligned.
Right. Now, you mentioned that Japan has been sidelined. Do you think there's a weakening of the relationship between Washington, Seoul, and Tokyo as a result of all these latest developments?
Japan says no. I mean, they have their own domestic issue going on right now as well. But this is why it's important for diplomats to be staffed and have long relationships and have the State Department not be hollowed out, right? You need people to sort of carry these relationships on and make sure that everybody's anxieties are quelled. While there's a lot of domestic coverage of this right now, I don't think that overall the relationship has been damaged in any significant way.
I think actually it might have been improved. That
Between
South Korea, Japan, and the U.S., it might have been improved through this. I mean, it's been a big headache. North Korea has been a big headache for everybody, and Moon Jae-in just might be the aspirin that's getting rid of that headache and weaving the three countries' policy toward North Korea together under sort of Moon's leadership.
Right.
What impressed me about Japan is that a couple of weeks ago they were totally opposed to any talk with North Korea, and Abe said he would consider a summit with Kim Jong-un. So this kind of flip-flopping, they really follow American diplomacy so faithfully. I struggle to see Japan as such an important player on this particular issue. They just seem to follow Washington.
Okay, so continuing on with Japan, a Japanese outlet has said that Japan is willing to foot the initial cost of inspections at Pyongyang's nuclear facilities. Do you think Kim Jong-un would actually allow inspection of the nuclear facilities?
North Korea did in the past, so I don't think that would not be possible. Yeah, it's possible.
I think it depends on the facilities and how you define facilities. I don't think they're going to let IAEA inspectors hop in a helicopter and go to any military base in North Korea at a moment's notice. I don't think that's going to happen. And that's the kind of challenge that you have in proving that negative, proving that you don't have something. This is the problem that they had in Iraq. You couldn't conclusively prove that negative, that they don't have something. So the suspicions that Iraq had WMD could fester and fester, despite the fact, discovered later, that they didn't have huge stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction. And that's what, you know, really legitimized the invasion of that country and the sort of quagmire that developed in the Middle East because of it.
Right. Now, the Trump-Kim summit is expected to follow closely on the heels of the Moon-Kim summit. And how do you think the results of that meeting, the Moon-Kim summit, will affect that between Washington and Pyongyang?
I think it'll be kind of key to laying the groundwork for it and to give, I think, you know, the U.S. and the international community a better idea of what North Korea wants and what North Korea is willing to give up. At the same time, I have that overriding caution that, you know, Trump and Kim shouldn't really be trying to settle anything, but just set the stage for, you know, those diplomats from the U.S. as yet to be put in their position or named to negotiate those details down the road.
I find it very striking because once again, this is really South Korea who is back in the driver's seat. And I think South Korea, through this first summit, they will really be able to bring their own idea and to wait enormously on the summit that will follow.
Right. Now let's talk about some of the common concerns that are being voiced. What do you think is the likelihood, or are you concerned that North Korea would suddenly revert back to its old strategy and, you know, re-engage in tests and provocations?
It's always possible. I mean, this is what happened in 2012, 6 years ago, when the Leap Day deal fell apart. There was a deal, and then North Korea announced its intention to launch a satellite, which then sort of nullified the deal.
Yeah.
And so there is a history, or a recent history, of North Korea dealing in bad faith, or what the U.S. saw as bad faith. And so that is a potential, you know, area. But then the U.S. Also needs to be a negotiating partner that North Korea can trust. And so right now, I think, especially with all the criticism of the Iran deal, North Korea doesn't really have a lot of faith that even if it were to enter some sort of disarmament conversation, that the U.S. would hold to it, because look at the most recent one, Iran, which was painstakingly negotiated.
Now, some are concerned that all these developments are happening too fast. Does that echo your sentiment?
Well, I don't think it could have happened if it didn't happen real fast. If Donald Trump didn't say yes then, he would have been talked out of it. You know, Rex Tillerson would have talked him out of it, or Mike Pompeo, the new Secretary of State in the United States, would have talked talked him out of it. That's a much greater possibility. With him saying yes right away, we have yes right away. So a summit's going to take place, and I think that's an incredibly positive development and may again lead to talks and negotiations. Now, another thing is that a lot of people say, the U.S. shouldn't talk for talk's sake. They should have gotten some concessions out of North Korea before agreeing to the summit. That may be the case, but they got something out of North Korea, a freeze of its nuclear tests and missile tests. And I view that as a success. The longer that they're not testing those weapons, the longer it would take for them to have a so-called breakout and have a verifiable ICBM, nuclear-tipped ICBM. So I think that, again, talk for talk's sake, if you're getting a freeze out of it, that's a good thing.
That's a good thing. All right. The upcoming Trump-Kim Jong-un summit talk is a valuable chance at negotiation, and I'm sure that thorough preparation by all parties involved will ensure that this opportunity does not go to waste. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye.